All right, we're just going to finish up section 4.5. There's some translations for sine and cosine curves. Those would be horizontal translations we're going to work with first. And you know it's horizontal whenever you have parentheses after your sine or cosine function. So it would be x minus something or x plus something. That would tell you that you're being moved horizontally. So what you're going to have to do for sine and cosine when you have those horizontal shifts is you're going to take whatever inside the parentheses. You're going to set it equal to 0 and 2 pi, and that will give you the starting and ending point of one cycle. That's going to help you set up the whole 5 key points. All right, so first we're gonna analyze. We're not going to graph. Analyzing meaning finding the 5 key points. So because there's a horizontal shift, and I know that seeing the parentheses, I take the x minus pi over 3, and I set it equal to 0 and 2 pi. That's going to give me my starting and ending point if I solve for x in both of these here. So this would be pi over 3 and 7 pi over 3 as my starting and ending point. So when I make my chart then for my 5 key points, my first x value is pi over 3 and my last is 7 pi over 3. So here's where it's not as obvious as that last example from 0 to 4 pi to know what those inside points are. So what I would want to do to find the middle point, maybe we should label these key points first. This is sine, so intercept, max, intercept, min, intercept. If I want to find out the x value for that middle intercept, I would add up pi over 3 and 7 pi over 3 and divide by 2. So if I add them together, I get 8 pi over 3, and divide by 2, I get 4 pi over 3. So that's my middle x value. And I'm going to do the same thing with the first half to find the max. I'll add pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3, and divide by 2, and I'll get 5 pi over 6. I'll do the same thing for the minimum. Add 4 pi over 3 and 7 pi over 3, divide by 2, and I get 11 pi over 6. So those are my x values. Now the y values are actually the easy part because we know that all of our intercepts are going to be 0. I look at the a value, the 1/2, to figure out my max and min. My max is going to be 1/2 and my min is going to be negative 1/2. Okay. On to the last couple examples here. So now we have a couple transformations. We have negative 3 cosine 2 pi x plus 4 pi. So I need to figure out my starting and ending points. I take whatever is in my parentheses, 2 pi x plus 4 pi, set it equals 0, and 2 pi, and solve both for x. Okay, so my starting point is negative 2, my ending point is negative 1. Make my 5 key points. And my first point is negative 2, and my last point is negative 1. I also know that this is a cosine graph, so I started at a max and ended at a max. But you have to be really careful here because that's actually not what's going to happen because of this negative. That negative flips everything over. So normally we would start at a max and end at a max, and now instead of being a max, it's going to be a min. So just be really careful when that happens. Which means the middle is going to be a max, and the other two are intercepts. Okay, so now halfway between negative 2 and negative 1 is negative 3 halves. Halfway between negative 2 and negative 3 halves is negative 7 fourths. And halfway between negative 3 halves and negative 1 is negative 5 fourths. And then the y values. Well, I know that my height is 3. So if I'm starting at a minimum, that would be negative 3. Intercept is 0. Max is 3. Intercept is 0. Min is negative 3. And those are my 5 key points. And then my last example, I have, instead of a horizontal translation, I have a vertical translation. Vertical translations occur when there's a number added or subtracted outside of the entire function. So that's this 2. We have 2 plus the entire function. That 2 is a vertical shift. So I need to figure out what my period is. So I see that b, so I do 2 pi over b. My period is just pi. So I start at 0 and at pi. It says cosine, which means it starts at a max. It's not being flipped over, so we're good to go with that. Halfway between 0 and pi is pi over 2. And then pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. Now what I like to do when I have a vertical translation is I actually like to make 3 rows. I like to make 1 row ignoring the vertical translation, so just looking at 3 cosine 2x, and then I want to add 2 to all my values. I just think that's an easier way to keep track of it than trying to do everything all at once. Okay, so my max is going to be 3, intercept 0, and negative 3, intercept 0, max 3 again. I know that from the a value in front of the cosine function. And then I'm going to add 2 to all my values to get my final answer. Okay, so the green values there, those are my actual y values. That middle row is just a helper step. I don't need to put that in my final answer or anything. For my graph, I do not need to graph that part. Okay, so that was graphing sine and cosine functions, chapter 4, section 5.